It's 10 o'clock. This is Sky News at 10, our top story. A criminal investigation and questions for the head of the BBC. But the drummer for the band, Bob Vylan, is unrepentant after anti-IDF chants at Glastonbury.
Regardless of how it was said, calling for an end to the slaughter of innocents is never wrong. To civilians of Israel, understand this anger is not directed at you.
In Gaza, dozens killed in airstrikes as the Israeli military intensifies its bombardment. Here, protests and concessions ahead of a crucial vote on the government's welfare reform bill. Up to 60 Labour MPs could still rebel. A heat health alert is extended in the UK as a scorching heatwave grips Europe. Plus, the end of the line for the Royal Met train, now destined for a museum because of high repair costs. And we'll take a first look at tomorrow's front pages. That's in our press preview from 10:30 right through to midnight. Hello, good evening. The Director General of the BBC is facing calls for his resignation tonight after a Glastonbury row over a performer's anti-Semitic chant, which was live-streamed online. The Culture Secretary, Lisa Nandy, suggested the corporation had a problem of leadership, as Avon and Somerset Police confirmed a criminal investigation. The band, Bob Vylan, led a chant of death to the IDF during their performance on Saturday. In the 48 hours that followed, they were condemned by organisers and the Prime Minister, dropped by their agents and had their US visas revoked. In a video posted on social media, the group's drummer insisted that calling for an end to the slaughter of innocents was never wrong. Here's our arts and entertainment correspondent, Katie Spencer.
No more music, just sweaty car journeys and hangovers for those leaving Worthy Farm. But nothing in comparison to the mother of all headaches facing the BBC. With police now launching a criminal investigation after reviewing footage broadcast from Glastonbury Festival this weekend. It comes after the Prime Minister and media watchdog Ofcom asked why whoever was running this live stream didn't pull the plug on it after political rockers Bob Vylan said this.
Death, death to the IDF, death, death to the IDF.
Comments widely criticised as anti-Semitic and which the BBC now accepts should not have been broadcast. The matter now being talked about on an altogether more serious stage, with Director General Tim Davies' leadership being called into question.
He makes an extremely important point about accountability, and that is something that is not lost on me as the Secretary of State and something that I've impressed upon the BBC leadership as well. When you have one editorial failure, it's something that must be gripped. When you have several, it becomes a problem of leadership.
While hindsight will be being used to excuse the behaviour of many who leave here with regrets, the BBC is now hoping to run with that as well. With calls from some quarters for Tim Davie to resign. In an updated statement, the corporation saying the anti-Semitic sentiments expressed were utterly unacceptable and have no place on our airwaves. The team were dealing with a live situation, but with hindsight, we should have pulled the stream. We regret this did not happen.
A cursory look online tells you that this man has said that he likes upsetting people, that he was quite likely to say something very radical, and therefore I would not have streamed him live, just as they didn't stream Kneecap live.
Dropped by their agent and ahead of touring in America, the State Department confirming it's revoked the band's work visas, saying foreigners who glorify violence and hatred are not welcome visitors to our country. No apology from the duo, but the band's drummer sharing this video.
First it was Kneecap, now it's us too. And once the talk tapers off, they'll find others so they can stoke more anger and reinforce division. Regardless of how it was said, calling for an end to the slaughter of innocents is never wrong. To civilians of Israel, understand this anger is not directed at you, and don't let your government persuade you that a call against an army is a call against the people.
And this statement from its frontman. As I lay in bed this morning, my phone buzzing non-stop, inundated with messages of both support and hatred, I listened to my daughter typing as she fills out a school survey. Teaching our children to speak up for the change they want is the only way that we make this world a better place. After calling for people to be killed, few would accept Bob Vylan are in any position to lecture anyone on the right thing to do. Certainly not Sir Keir Starmer, who has said there can be no excuse for that chant, that it absolutely should not have gone to air. And while Glastonbury's coverage shouldn't be held to the same standard of impartiality expected of news programming, Ofcom has said it's very concerned and wants to know what procedures were in place to ensure the BBC's own editorial guidelines would be met. Back to real life for those leaving Worthy Farm. A sobering reality check for the BBC as it fields renewed calls for answers.
Well, Katie is here with me now, and Katie, the Culture Secretary, really being quite strong today, raising doubts about the leadership of the BBC.
Yep, Tim Davies' name coming up a lot in those discussions. And you might have expected to see him out and wanting to sort of give his response today. But according to the Telegraph, there might be a very good reason that he's not coming out today, because he was, according to their sources, actually at Glastonbury over the weekend, which, of course, raises questions about why he didn't sort of come to the decision of pulling that live stream a bit earlier. Now, of course, there are various levels of management that would act as a buffer between that sort of decision-making process from those in charge of Glastonbury and Tim Davie. But either he wasn't informed, which is bad, or he was informed and he went along with that decision to keep that live stream as something that could be replayed, which is bad. And under his leadership, he's had several of these missteps now over the handling of content related to what's going on with Gaza. I think if we don't see him come out and talk about this over the next couple of days, then I think we really are only going to sort of hear these calls for his resignation continue.
Katie, thank you. Well, in Gaza, the Israeli military acknowledged today that Palestinian civilians had been harmed at aid distribution sites and issued new guidance to its forces. That development, as dozens of people were killed on the Strip today, including at a popular beachfront cafe frequented by journalists and students. There have been reports that a ceasefire could soon be possible. And tonight, the White House confirmed that the Israeli Prime Minister will travel to Washington to meet Donald Trump next week. Our international correspondent, Alex Rossi, has this report.
The talks about resuming ceasefire negotiations might as well be happening on another planet. In Gaza, the grim reality remains unchanged. It's been another day of relentless violence and a rising death toll. This was a beachfront cafe in Gaza City and was full of people when it was struck. It was one of the few remaining places with a reliable internet connection. At least 22 people were killed here, according to medical responders.
Forget red lines, we're past that. Nothing left to say. Look around. All I see is blood. Men, martyrs, limbs, unbelievable. People come here to rest, get some internet, take a break from what they see inside Gaza. They come westward to breathe.
Among the dead, Franz al-Salmi, who was a well-known artist, and Ismail Abu Khattab, a photojournalist. More than 50 people were also injured in the strike. These images, taken moments after the blast, show Palestinian journalist Bayan Abu Sultan. She's covered in blood and visibly dazed. Over the past 24 hours, Israeli airstrikes have intensified, some of the heaviest bombardments in weeks. They follow new evacuation orders in northern Gaza, triggering yet another wave of displacement. The horror in Gaza plays out in slow motion, each day bringing new funerals. Civilians, exhausted, starving and terrified, can only endure as international efforts to broker a ceasefire once again appear to be gathering pace. For civilians, though, trapped with nowhere to escape the bombs, a diplomatic breakthrough feels unbearably distant. Alex Rossi, Sky News, Jerusalem.
It is almost 1 year since Keir Starmer became Prime Minister, and tonight he is facing one of the toughest tests of his premiership so far. MPs will vote on his flagship welfare reform bill tomorrow, and despite last-minute concessions, as many as 60 from his own party are expected to rebel. That is after the government's own figures suggested 150,000 more people will be driven into poverty under the plans. Here's our political correspondent, Tamara Cohen.
They've come out in the beating sun to protest changes to disability benefits, which have left Keir Starmer feeling the heat.
Stop the cut!
The government was forced to ditch its original plans after a huge rebellion by MPs.
Liz Kendall.
The Welfare Secretary confirmed that current claimants won't lose out.
We believe protecting existing claimants whilst beginning to focus PIP on those with higher needs for new claimants going forward strikes the right and fair balance.
There's more money for job support.
An additional £300 million into employment support for sick and disabled people.
And universal credit will rise.
This will ensure no existing claimants are put into poverty as a result of the changes in this bill.
No existing claimants, but the government admit 150,000 new ones will be poorer, and that was too much for some Labour MPs.
I welcome progress, but I cannot countenance sick and disabled people being denied support to enable them to be independent in the future.
Having no public consultation on these plans excludes the voices of disabled people. This is not just about process. This makes disabled people worse off.
The Conservative leader said the changes do not save enough money.
We will be voting against, because at the end of the day, we have to look at who we're doing this for. It is the taxpayer, it is the next generation who are having to pay a lot of money in debt.
People here are holding on to hope that MPs might still reject these changes. But even if they get through, the rebels have damaged the Prime Minister's authority and delivered a stark warning about what they'll accept that government can't ignore.
This new MP still has concerns. A review of PIP won't report before the cuts come in.
Whether 30, 40, 50, I don't know, and that's a complete estimate. But so there are still people who are not happy with this bill, and I genuinely think the government should just pause it just for a little bit, get that assessment of the PIP point sorted out.
In Leicester, where Liz Kendall is the MP, we met Abigail. She was working full-time and engaged when a sudden diagnosis with a debilitating condition changed her life.
What's your message to the Labour MPs who have to vote on this?
I just wish these MPs, that when they vote, remember that anyone can suddenly become disabled and it can, devastate their lives.
She wouldn't score 4 points under the new criteria and is worried for future claimants.
We're being thrown to the wolves, basically, and it's going to have a devastating effect. And after 15 years of Tory austerity, we're now facing austerity 2.0.
This was a rebellion which threatened to derail the government's agenda. Ministers hope they've done enough to take the temperature down. Tamara Cohen, Sky News, Westminster.
Well, our political correspondent Liz Bates is in Downing Street for us tonight. And Liz, this is a gamble for Keir Starmer. He could still be facing his first Commons defeat as Prime Minister.
And he could still be facing his first Commons defeat, and that is quite surprising. It's been a really challenging day today for the government, for the Prime Minister and for the Work and Pension Secretary, Liz Kendall. This was a rebellion that was really building up last week and got to those high numbers, 120 MPs signing an amendment that could have blocked this legislation. It seemed like over the weekend an intervention from the government coming to the table with the rebels and offering them some very costly, very significant changes had in the end worked, and a big group, a significant number of those rebels had decided that that was enough for them and they were willing to get in line behind the government. Today, all of that seemed to be thrown up in the air when Liz Kendall stood up in the Commons. Some of those key rebels, those key committee chairs, Meg Hillier, Debbie Abrahams and others, stood up, and instead of offering support, they were raising more questions and they seemed critical of this legislation still, and wanting an explanation from Liz Kendall that it didn't seem like like it came in the House of Commons chamber today. And speaking to MPs behind the scenes in the House of Commons tonight, that group that originally signed that amendment has fractured in all different directions. Some of them have been won over. There's a hardcore group that are going to vote against this legislation, and there are a lot in the middle that are still undecided, even at this late hour. Now, there will be an urgent effort driven by Number 10 to win those people over tonight, because if they don't, they are facing a huge, humiliating Commons defeat that we thought had gone away over the weekend. But tonight, the government is still staring that humiliating defeat in the face.
Liz, plenty to look out for tomorrow. Thank you for now. Now, today marked one of the hottest June days on record, with health warnings in place across much of the country. Temperatures hit 33.1 degrees at Heathrow this afternoon, with more hot weather expected tomorrow in the UK and across parts of Europe. The extreme conditions are caused by hot North African air, which has become trapped under a so-called heat dome. Our science correspondent Thomas Moore can explain the latest.
As Britain baked, the wise and the fortunate sought refuge on beaches and in lidos, anywhere to take the edge off the unusually high June temperatures. At Wimbledon, it was the hottest opening day on record, and tennis fans came prepared.
Everybody should drink a lot of water and enjoy the sun whilst it's here.
Just got some visor, got a bag of ice
I've got
in
a bag
here.
literally full of ice packs.
Water. I think water is going to save me. Yeah, and umbrellas too.
June is supposed to be pleasantly balmy, but this is the second scorcher of the summer already. So what's going on? Well, it has a lot to do with a jet stream, normally sweeping high-altitude winds eastwards across the UK. Right now, it has formed a huge wave from south to north. That has sucked hot air up from North Africa to the continent, and it is going nowhere fast, almost locked in place beneath what is called a heat dome. High air pressure has formed a lid over the continent. It squeezes down on the air closer to the surface, increasing temperatures and stops it escaping. It is like a pressure cooker. And look at the impact on temperatures. For the deep, dark reds on this scale, it's around 10 to 12 degrees hotter than normal. The southeast of the UK catches the edge, but the heat dome sits over the continent for days to come, only slowly moving east. Climate change is making heat waves in June much more likely. Before the industrial age, the southeast of England could have expected 3 consecutive days above 28 degrees once every 50 years. According to the World Weather Attribution Service, it is now 1 in every 5 years. So a heat wave in the coolest month of the summer is now 10 times more likely, and there could be more to come.
The likelihood of seeing heat waves again during the summer period, I think, is quite likely. Combine that with the marine heat wave that we've got, so that extra energy and heat that we're getting from the oceans around the UK. But also, if we don't see much rain, if that ground remains quite dry and parched, then again, the energy from the sun really just goes into increasing the temperatures rather than evaporating any moisture.
Mediterranean plants are thriving as the climate changes and heat becomes a new normal, according to the Royal Horticultural Society. It's just not summer as we used to know it. Thomas Moore, Sky News.
Now, it was the late Queen's favourite mode of transport, but Buckingham Palace has confirmed that the royal train is to be scrapped in favour of 2 new helicopters. That's as the royal family applies what it calls fiscal discipline to deliver value for money. Here's our royal correspondent, Rhiannon Mills.
It was once Queen Elizabeth's favourite way to travel. Now the royal train has reached the end of the line. Used only twice last year, the decision has been made to take it out of action. The bill to bring it up to date seemed to be too much, meaning that in a couple of years it's destined to potentially become a museum piece. It's the cost of other travel that is likely to raise eyebrows. Remember this trip to Australia and then on to Samoa last year? Flights for the King and Queen and their staff cost over £400,000. Just part of a £4.7 million travel bill the royal family racked up travelling abroad and across the UK. It is the sovereign grant, which comes from the profits of the Crown Estate, that pays for their official work. Over the next 2 years, that's actually going up from 86.3 million to 132 million. And amazingly, it's all down to the fact that wind farms are being built on Crown estate land, and that is boosting profits. Now, the Palace would argue that extra money is going to help to refurb places like Buckingham Palace and other heritage sites for the nation, but campaigners still aren't happy about it. Republic carrying out this stunt a couple of weeks ago.
The whole process of reporting the royal finances needs to be taken out of the hands of the royal household. It should be dealt with by the Treasury. And it should be reported by the government to Parliament, where it can be properly scrutinised. For example, the detail of their travel costs is not broken down. And in Parliament, people can ask serious questions about why they're spending so much money on themselves.
Prince William, meeting the Lionesses earlier, felt the heat of scrutiny last year about the Duchy of Cornwall, which funds the heir to the throne. Now they've announced that they won't be charging rent to certain charities who use their buildings. But again, they haven't revealed how much tax William pays on the 22.9 million that he receives from the duchy, only saying he pays the highest rate. The finances are always billed as the royals being more transparent about how they get their money, but there'll always be those who say we deserve to know more. Rhiannon Mills, Sky News at Buckingham Palace.
Well, now to a cold case investigation involving a woman who was born in the 19th century and her killer, who was 92 years old when he was convicted. Ryland Headley was today found guilty of the rape and murder of 75-year-old Louisa Dunn in Bristol almost 60 years ago. Police are now investigating if he could be responsible for other unsolved crimes. Our West of England correspondent Dan Whitehead reports.
A victim born more than 133 years ago, her killer only now behind bars. Louisa Dunn was 75 years old when she was raped and murdered in her own home in Bristol. It was the latest DNA testing that finally found the man responsible.
This is about your grandmother. And I said, have they caught him? This came out, I never thought I'd say anything like that. Have you caught him? And she said, we have a suspect.
June the 28th, 1967. Louisa Dunn's neighbours noticed she wasn't stood on her doorstep that morning, watching the world go by as she normally would. Instead, they discovered her dead inside her house, bruised, bleeding from one ear, her underwear around her ankles.
At the time of the original investigation, police found a palm print on the rear window of Louisa Dunn's house. They took around 19,000 prints from local men and boys, but the man who was responsible, a Ryland Headley, lived just outside the ring of selected homes, so wasn't found.
Traces of semen were discovered on Louisa's clothes, but this was 20 years before DNA testing. All the evidence was stored in Police HQ for nearly 6 decades, but in 2024 it was re-examined. New tests found a DNA match. Police were told it was 1 billion times more likely to belong to Ryland Headley than anyone else.
I had to read that email a number of times to actually fully digest the content of it and believe what I was reading. And then it was okay, game on, let's get this investigation going.
I'm here today because I'm arresting you on suspicion of the rape and murder of Louisa Dunn.
Ryland Headley was arrested at his home in Suffolk, now 92 years old. He said nothing in police interviews.
No comment.
And didn't give evidence in the trial. As well as the DNA link, officers matched his palm to the print taken in 1967. His conviction brings relief to Mary, who has lived with what happened to her grandmother for most of her life.
I think it's appalling. The poor woman. It must have been absolutely terrifying. And the reality of a rape, I don't like thinking about. I don't think anybody does.
I think this investigation shows that you should never give up. Yes, it's from 1967, but actually, at the time, we reinstigated it in 2024. That was 57 years ago. There was a chance that a suspect could still be alive, and as it turned out, he was.
This is thought to be the longest cold case from crime to trial in the UK. One that's finally brought justice more than half a century on. Dan Whitehead, Sky News in Bristol.
In other news tonight, the star of RuPaul's Drag Race, The Vivienne, died by misadventure, an inquest has concluded. The 32-year-old, whose real name was James Lee Williams, was found dead in a bath in February, having suffered a cardiac arrest after taking ketamine. Jurors have started deliberating in the trial of Sean Diddy Combs on charges that could put the hip-hop mogul behind bars for the rest of his life. He has pleaded not guilty to 5 criminal counts, including racketeering, sex trafficking by force, fraud or coercion, and transportation to engage in prostitution. The Conservative MP George Freeman has been asked to step back from his role as a government trade envoy over claims that he was paid by a company that helped him write questions to the government. Mr Freeman, an envoy to Malaysia, the Philippines, Singapore and Brunei, has referred himself to the parliamentary watchdog. The murder of a female student who believed she was being taken on a first date has rocked South Africa and once again highlighted the country's femicide crisis. Last year, more than 5,500 women were murdered, an increase of more than a third on the previous year. Sky's Africa correspondent Yusra El-Bahir has this report.
A search party of 7 set out to find Olerato Mongali.
So I thought, no man, we're going to find her. There's no way we're not going to find her.
After she went silent on a first date.
It didn't make sense. Where is she? Why is she missing? And we just, every place we went to looked dodgier and dodgier, and it made me panic. I was very scared.
They file a missing persons report and continue their search.
So this is where the pin brought us, to this house.
Little did they know, they were less than 100 meters from where Olerato's body had been dumped.
This is where her body was found by somebody who lives in this house, I think. She had just been thrown here. Her top was open with her breasts out. Her legs were looking that way, and her face was just beaten. It was very difficult for me to see her like that. Sorry.
This is how Olerato's loved ones want her to be remembered. Vibrant, happy, and traveling the world. This CCTV footage is the last time she was seen alive, leaving her home in Johannesburg and walking to the car of a man who asked her out on a date. She appears hesitant. He's not alone in the car. Days later, police would find the car with Olerato's blood across the back seat and shoot one of the 2 men who targeted her dead. They're part of a dangerous criminal syndicate that corner young women in malls, lure them out on dates, and rob them. We spoke to one of the survivors of their deadly money-making scheme.
I went through the same traumatic experience 2 days before Olerato's murder. I was threatened at gunpoint and with a knife, saying I should bring my belongings, and if I don't cooperate, they were going to shoot me.
In the midst of growing criticism around inaction, South African police told us they are determined to tackle the growing femicide crisis here.
This is really a serious issue because the numbers cannot be this high, and majority perish in the hands of, like the case of Olerato, where you will think at the age of 30 you need to live your life as a young woman.
How do you think the police handled this case?
I think we glorified them a bit too much. I think her friends were the real heroes in that moment. I mean, 2 police stations that were 10 minutes apart, one finds a body, one has a missing case. Don't make a connection for hours. It's not the most reassuring police work. And if the friends hadn't come forward, then how long would it have taken?
She said she wants to nourish a tree.
A lemon tree stands where Olerato's body has been laid to rest, surrounded by bouquets and already bearing bitter fruit.
I cry a lot when I'm alone, most of the time. It's painful. Because when you have one child, I mean, just one, and she's taken away from you at the age of 30. So I never thought I'll bury my child. It is painful.
Olerato's ruthless murder is difficult for her loved ones and damning for the country. A brutal warning to women here that they are being hunted. Yusra al-Bagher, Sky News, Johannesburg.
Well, there was a great start for the British players on day one at Wimbledon. Sonny Cartel stunned the former French Open champion, Elena Ostapenko. The British number 3 was 5-2 down in the first set, but stormed back to win 7-5, 6-2. Katie Boulter overcame Spanish 9th seed Paula Badosa, while Emma Raducanu came out on top of the all-British clash against Mimi Ju, a straight sets win against the 17-year-old Grand Slam debutante from Wales. Well, a big shock in the men's draw as Britain's Arthur Ferry knocked out the 20th seed, Alexei Popyrin, a player who eliminated Novak Djokovic at last year's US Open. Ferry is ranked, would you believe it, world number 461. And the fairy tale continues for world number 733, Oliver Tarvet, who won in straight sets against fellow qualifier Leandro Reedy. An ominous task awaits him, though, the defending champion, Carlos Alcaraz. Well, that was Sky News at 10. Coming up, we will take a first look at tomorrow's newspapers in the press preview. Tonight, joined by The Sun's editor-at-large, Harry Cole, and The Guardian's political editor, Pippa Crerar. All of us in Wimbledon colours, as you can see. Getting ready for that. Certainly among the stories we will be discussing, this on the front page of the Financial Times. Its headline, Diluted Welfare Reform halves savings, but still pushes 150,000 into poverty. That and plenty more when we come back.